Broadcast comes from
the Michigan Historic Preservation Network is a nonprofit organization dedicated to connecting our past with the present and linking us to the future. Together, we can save spaces.
with additional support from Constellation Films, creating motion pictures, films, and videos since 1991.
And Harness Dickey and Pierce, intellectual property attorneys specializing in patent, trademark, and copyright law and litigation since 1921, with offices in Michigan and Washington, D.C. Not so long ago, small neighborhood movie theaters dotted the American landscape. They were in every hometown. Their charming decor, glowing marquees, and wondrous silver screens brought the glamour of Hollywood to the front porch of Main Street, USA.
The experience of going to the movies is partly in the building. You get out of your house. You get into this wonderful surrounding.
There's a sense of something special going on. When you walk through the door of a theater, especially an old theater, there is something magical about it.
There was a difference between the neighborhoods and the downtown theaters. The downtown theaters were elaborate, awesome, great structures that would have real oil paintings. They would have sculpture. They would have thick carpets. They'd have a corps of ushers with white gloves who would take you to your seat.
Neighborhood theaters were the heart and soul of their communities, from the Depression through the war years until television became more prevalent.
A lot of those neighborhood theaters sprang up simply because of their geographic location, and may have been at a major cross street of streetcars, or, of course, later on a bus route. Or it may have been just because of the axis of two major intersections coming together that created a literal small downtown, if you will, a bustling commercial area.
They had, well, not first-run movies by any means. They had what they could get, and they had a lot of exciting westerns, cowboy stories.
Tom Mix and Ken Maynard, and predating Roy Rogers and Gene Autry, predating the singing cowboys. Of course, I remember those came along too.
And maybe he'd almost get killed, and you would see him maybe holding his shoulder, and then the next Saturday you would go, and there it'd show you again where he was holding his shoulder, but the wound was just a graze on the shoulder, and then it would go maybe for 15 or 20 minutes, and then maybe that episode his leg was broken, and he was hobbling along. Then the next Saturday you would go. It was continuous like that.
Romantic things.
Joan Crawford. That was a movie star.
They also had the newsreel.
I remember the first, was it Pathé with the crowing cock as far as the news, or the newsreel.
The comic, attractions, coming attractions.
And we would talk about what we were going to see, the next Saturday that we went, or the next Friday that we went. So it was ongoing and went on and on, just like the soap operas of today.
But over time, with the development of improved highway systems and suburban sprawl, people started moving away from the old neighborhoods and out into the suburbs.
People keep moving out farther and farther. They love the old neighborhoods, but once they move, the memories stay with them, but they don't go back to visit that often.
Detroit in the past had 150 neighborhood theaters, and these theaters provided countless hours of entertainment to people of all ages.
There are very few neighborhood theaters today. They have been replaced. Now there are probably more screens in the area, but there are only a handful of theaters.
Many of these theaters, of course, were a beacon for their neighborhood. I mean, they were the lifeblood of a neighborhood. And when those lights go out, the rest of the neighborhood dies a little bit.
In most metropolitan areas, like here in Detroit, the old-time neighborhood theaters are gone. But with a little searching, some perseverance, and a keen eye, some can still be found. It's painful, as in Berkley, Michigan, when a theater can no longer survive showing films.
The last few years, the theater was going very badly into the red. The only way to go would be to sell the theater. They attempted to sell it as an active theater with things to be done to it. But everyone that contacted them wanted a sizable theater that they could turn into 3 or more theaters. One theater was not sufficient in today's market. Ultimately, Perry Drug bought the theater. Perry Drug was bought by Rite Aid. Now, a lot of the Berkley people were highly indignant that their theater was going to be sold and not be a theater anymore. And they did organize groups, and they tried to get petitions up, and they tried to see if they could get anybody to change their mind. But as a business proposition, the Colmers really had no choice.
If an adaptive reuse can be found for some of these, whether it is a drugstore, which in so many cases today is, then so be it. Such as the Berkley Theater, whereby the marquee is maintained and the poster boxes are still out there, and then at least we have something, to show the children of tomorrow.
The marquee area is blocked off on the inside. Now, there's ways to get in it. There has to be in order to clean and do things, put the lights up. But it is not visible from the inside. Inside, in the lobby of the drugstore, a little arrangement was made with the brass poles of the hangings that had been in the theater lobby, and some of the red chairs were placed there. So it looked a little bit like you were going into a theater, and this was a perpetual memento of what it had been.
Well, I think the major thing is its uniqueness, and that there's not very many small towns left that have these. And it is visually attractive, and it is kind of the centerpiece of the downtown area.
The identity of downtown can be preserved in part by a theater. It cannot be preserved by having just a fake part of a theater. To have a theater marquee that is the front of some kind of business is what I call nostalgia porn. It's the emotion without the reality.
Rite Aid owns the building, but we are leasing that from them for $1 a year. And along with that lease is we're in charge of the upkeep and maintenance of that, in which we use it for the community service organizations, our city, the school district, and other various organizations that want to use it. There has been a lot of detail and a lot of time put into it.
It's got a lot of sentimental value in the whole community. And, of course, new people that move in who ask about it, there's always somebody in the neighborhood that can tell them all about the theater. And so it's part of their new heritage after they come here. They're very glad that it's visually still there because it's a landmark. This is an Art Deco style. It was extremely popular. and there aren't too many of them left. And then there's always the lingering hope that maybe someday it might turn back into a theater again. Who knows?
The Alger Theater, on Detroit's east side, was saved by a group of determined citizens. But without major funding and political clout, its fate is uncertain.
We saw that this Alger Theater in the very heart of our community had been vacant for a number of years, realizing that if we left it vacant for any length of time, it would probably be torn down.
I have several memories of coming to the Alger. I grew up here on the east side of Detroit. I think it's kind of a landmark. I mean, it's a very high traffic corner we have here.
We got together in May of 1983 and formed Friends of the Alger Theater, a nonprofit neighborhood organization, a grassroots type effort. By December of 1986, we were able to purchase the theater. We paid $12,500 for it, but we also ran into some problem when we bought it because the previous owners had owed over $30,000 in back taxes. We went before City Council a couple times to see if we could have the interest and penalty waived. They said, unfortunately, they couldn't do anything about it.
I think it's important to save them if it's economically feasible. I mean, I would love to save every theater, but obviously that can't happen. I think if the economics are working for that particular theater, then by all means, try to maintain it.
It's important to preserve some neighborhood theaters, some of them that are really special. A great many neighborhood theaters have been torn down for parking lots. They've been turned into car washes. Some of them have been bought for churches. Some of them are not worth keeping except as a nostalgia exercise. However, some are.
The donations we get from people, this has been a major source of income. Anywhere from $20 to $50 has been the average donation over the years. So during this 15-year period, we've raised over $125,000.
Preservation is very vital to every generation. Historic preservation should be incorporated in just about everything, from the neighborhood theaters to the houses. Lots of them have been demolished or used for other businesses. But I would recommend highly that we should go back to the neighborhood theaters so the families can have some neighborhood entertainment that is structured. It could be recreational, it could be musical, it could be even educational.
In restoring the theater, we're not going to concentrate just on movies. We want to make this a multi-purpose theater.
All kinds of live performance is a possibility, and we don't propose to put these performances on, but simply to make a venue available to the many artists that are in Detroit. In the 70s, there were some good live plays and music concerts here that were put on by Mr. Irv Steiner, who at that time was the owner, and those were excellent shows, very well attended, and mostly sold out, as I recall.
And lots of people today have lots of talent. And rather than just singing and dancing, we could maybe even have some neighborhood performances and get the kids involved in constructive activities.
And so in that sense, it's very symbolic, and it would be a huge positive when we get the building restored.
Neighborhood involvement, because it did belong to the neighborhood. I might be a dreamer, but I'll dream.
It's important that we maintain the historical aspect of our neighborhood heritage here. And this Alger Theater is a key landmark in this community that should be respected for what it represents to the community.
Like the Detroit's Alger, when Lapeer's Pix Theater closed, its future, too, was unclear.
The theater was built over the winter of 1941 by a gentleman named George Smith, and it opened in April of 1941 with a movie called The Bad Man, starring Wallace Beery and Lionel Barrymore, and featuring Ronald Reagan. During the wartime, right after the Pix opened, people came here to get news of their loved ones abroad. That's a pretty significant impact for a single establishment to have on a community. In the mid-60s, it was purchased by the Howell Theater Company, who at that time owned a number of small theaters around mid-Michigan. At one time, the Pix was the sole movie house for the county. There wasn't anything else around. There's been a number of multiplex theaters going, including one down the street on State Highway M24. That's a six-plex theater, and the original owners felt that the competition was more than they could bear. The Pix was their second-to-last theater, and they closed the doors here in April of 1996. We looked at several different options, including keeping it and just holding it as an empty facility until we could find somebody else to buy the space, or renovating it and then selling it, or, as we ultimately decided to do, renovate it and keep it ourselves and operate it as a community facility. We applied for about $110,000 from the Michigan Council for the Arts, which was half of what we needed to fund those initial elements of construction. And we were lucky enough to receive 98% of what we asked for.
And then the DDA and the city equally matched those monies. The community's very fortunate, because I don't think probably there would have been someone from the private sector to just come in and do that.
So we've been able to proceed with this project and not take anything back out of our initial vision for it. In the pure sense of the word, a restoration means to bring it back to what it originally was. And this theater was originally a movie house that sat about 550 people. When we bought it, it was still operating as a movie house. The original screen had been replaced, a bigger screen put in, and bigger seats had been put in. So the seat count reduced from about 550 down to about 420. With the installation of the stage, it reduces somewhat further down to 330. So we're taking out just under 100 seats.
They take on a personality of their own. You can hear the past lives and the voices of past audience members when you're sitting in the house. And sometimes you be here all by yourself, and you can hear, applause going on, or you can hear the reaction of audiences. And I think that's part of the charm and why so many people are interested. Beyond the architectural value, it's the cultural history.
This theater served as an anchor for the community. It was our center of entertainment and social gathering, if you will.
It's such an integral part of that community that any worthwhile way it can still be maintained so that it's lively and entertaining. It will still have a great sense of importance to the people of that area.
It looks good. When we first started, it was slow because there was so much concrete demolition, and every day I'd come in here and think, oh, this is never going to happen. But now we can see walls going up, we see the stage going in.
And because of all of their work and all of their efforts, the whole county of Lapeer essentially is going to benefit from that for years to come.
And there are a lot of people who are working very hard to make sure that the Pix has a bright future, and I expect that will be the case.
Though faced with today's problems of keeping a neighborhood theater open, the Farmington Civic continues to meet these challenges by adapting.
Farmington Civic Theater opened September 20, 1940. My father was the manager on that night. I came into the business when I got out of the Air Force in '73. Although I grew up in this business, I can't even tell you the first thing I did, probably scraping gum off the seat at the age of 2.
More screens equals more business. So many old theaters are expanded.
I went through a very similar type crisis back in the late 80s, and that was when I decided, well, it's time to twin the theater. We've got to do something to try to get more people here. There's a multiplex that isn't built today that doesn't have less than 15 or 20 screens, and this is because we have reached a point where you no longer have large numbers of people turning out for any given single movie. You can't fill a 700 or 800 seat theater today on a regular basis like you could in the past. So the result of that is to go to a smaller size theater, 400, 500, 600 seats, and increase the number of screens to give people a wider choice of movies.
And you have to justify, if you book a turkey film, you know, you have to have additional screens in order to amortize the loss on that film.
We changed the balcony into a separate auditorium, making the theater a twin movie theater instead of a single theater with a main floor and balcony seating. And that, of course, was done because of economic pressures and trying to keep the theater open.
A lot of people have twinned their balconies, which is also, you know, a cost-effective way of maintaining the original auditorium and making good use of your real estate upstairs. Or if the land is available, you simply add on next door.
We don't have the area in which we can go any larger than a twoplex. If I could get a threeplex or a fourplex in here, I certainly would do it, because that is the name of the game today and necessary to survive, because you don't pull 700 people for a show anymore.
I think the foot traffic is very important, because when I've been at the Civic, when we put on events and had a billboard out on the sidewalk or something on the marquee, the traffic that drives by goes so fast because it's on Grand River that it's nice to have so many people coming by, just walking by, and they say, oh, look what's on today, or oh, look what's going to be on this weekend.
And he's been bringing in some of the old vaudeville acts, the Soupy Sales, and some of the old standbys from the Detroit area to keep it going and to increase the interest in coming into Farmington. It's a drawing point, and it's, I think the city will do everything they can to help him stay there.
Many, many people stop to take advantage of the advertisement, because we're fortunate that we have as many pedestrians out there walking around looking for something to do for this evening or this weekend.
Downtowns were never built as areas that have large numbers of parking, and it's a change in trends. I mean, that's what you're seeing today, a change in trends. People are just finding different things. There is a certain element of resurgence in coming back to a downtown, and I'm hoping that that will always be the case and will keep the small theater alive and prospering.
I think the entrepreneur of the theater has to, in today's market, with so much competition, has to think of competitive ways to bring in the public. We, as the Downtown Development Authority, have tried to support the theater by having a travelogue series, summer fun and winter fun events for children, which we lease the theater, which then helps them to be able to stay open.
If the Civic had to close, it would impact the business in the viability of Farmington. There's no question in my mind.
I have no plans of closing up, but it's getting harder and harder every year.
Well, it might be a small cog, it's a very important cog. And well, it takes many things to make a good community, and that's one of them.
You might be able to fix up a building and open the doors, but you need the total caring and involvement of participation of all your community groups to make it happen and keep making it lively throughout the years. No question about it.
I would have to say that that's probably key to the success of any venture like this, is that you must get the community involved. You must have an emotional attachment.
I think if the area can support it, if you have good foot traffic, if you have good parking facilities, if the community is behind you, you have to have community cooperation or it's just not going to work.
And keep your eye focused on the objective of reopening a nice neighborhood theater, but knowing it's going to take time and a lot of effort and a lot of determination to reach that point.
Neighborhood theaters don't have to fade into history. If people get involved, work together to preserve them, and use them, then our few remaining neighborhood theaters can once again play active roles within their communities.
So the change in movie theaters, while we feel a certain nostalgia for them, is inevitable. change will always take place. The multiplexes that we see today will one day be replaced by something else. That's just the way theater is.
Support for this broadcast comes from
The Michigan Historic Preservation Network is a nonprofit organization dedicated to connecting our past with the present and linking us to the future. Together, we can save spaces.
with additional support from Constellation Film, creating motion pictures, films, and videos since 1991.
And Harness, Dickey and Pierce, intellectual property attorneys specializing in patent, trademark, and copyright law and litigation since 1921, with offices in Michigan and Washington.